this book discussion. Okay, so we're going to start with, I'm going to read to you guys Morgan's bio, and then we're going to get into some really, really good conversations. I obviously read your book, and I would say one of the best parts about this book is that you feel like you're talking to your best friend, and she's so relatable, so real, and you'll hear from our discussion, if you haven't read the book yet, just how special the content is, and she's so much wisdom and knowledge. So Dr. Morgan Cutlip is an author and relationship expert. With her down-to-earth style, she equips couples and individuals to tackle the trickiest relationship issues, offering fresh perspectives and empowering frameworks. She is experienced and trained in translating psychological theory and research into practical, accessible, and actionable advice, which she shares with her clients and social media followers at Dr. Morgan Cutlip. Through her books, courses, podcast, and her blog, as co-founder of mylovethings.com, Morgan earned her master's in human development and family science and her doctorate in counseling psychology. She is the author of Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself and A Better Share. A mother of two incredible kids, wife of her high school sweetheart, and lifelong lover of all things relationships. So this is Morgan.
Thank you for that. And why don't you introduce yourself and what you do too?
Yeah, so I mean, this is about you, but I've been a dating and relationship therapist and coach for the past over 20 years. And I work with singles, couples, breakups, and divorces. I have a book called Manifesting, a podcast called Love Talk Live, and I am also a speaker. So I love my job. I can't imagine doing anything else. Okay, so let's start with a very important question. Can you tell us what was the inspiration for this book and a little bit about your history growing up? Because it's very unique how you grew up with a dad who taught this stuff.
Yeah, so I really fell in love with the profession of relationships when I was in probably second or third grade, which sounds kind of strange, but my dad was going back for his PhD at the time, and I was in grade school, and he would sometimes take me to class with him. And we had about an hour drive each way, and I would pack like a pretend briefcase with papers and markers, and I would sit down at the table during his lectures, and I would take notes. But on the drive there and the drive home, we always played this game where he would give me a hypothetical case. Here's a family, here's what's going on in the family, here's a young kid. Like, how would you talk to this kid about what's going on? How would you? And so we would work through these sort of cases together. Fast forward, my dad started creating relationship education programs before everybody and their brother had an online course. And I would travel with him, and I would help him, or I'd work at his booth, or I would sell his books. So I kind of grew up in the relationship education field and developed a love for it. I knew eventually I wanted to do something to really support women in their relationships, but it wasn't clear to me what that looked like. Fast forward to our daughter being born. She's now 12. Her name is Effie, and she just threw me for a crazy loop. I went into motherhood thinking I was incredibly prepared, and she proved me wrong in every way imaginable, did not factor in temperament. And so that really became the motivation for my first book, because I felt lost in motherhood, very disassociated from myself. But also I was shocked at how I had a really great marriage. My husband's name is Chad. We love each other very much, but how quickly I could fall into a place of resentment in my own relationship. And so it was almost my transition into parenthood and motherhood became the motivation for both books. And part of why the resentment grew so quickly was he traveled every week for work, and I was the mom who was raised by a super mom. So I kind of just took on that persona myself. I asked for nearly nothing from him, and he didn't really jump in. And before you knew it, I felt like, why am I the one doing everything? How come I carry all this? Like, how come you don't know what goes in the diaper bag? And so I knew that if I was struggling with this stuff, if we were struggling with this stuff, then couples and women everywhere likely are. And so I knew eventually I could sort of organize tools and practical ways to help people in their relationships, because it's such a being able to navigate the responsibilities of modern family life together and feeling like a team is life-changing if you do it well. So
yeah, I mean,
important.
So many people are sitting at home and they are just feeling like they're the only ones going through it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the social media world where they're seeing everybody's perfect lives. And so it's so great that there are books like this. Yours is the best, because people don't feel as alone and it's very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, with that said, can you tell us why your book stands out? How is it different from other marriage relationship books?
How many of you even really know what the mental load is? A little bit. Yeah. Have you heard about it on social media? Mainly?
I feel like podcasts.
Podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get at least like a more nuanced perspective on it. But something, when I went, like, set out to write this book, there were a couple things that were really, really important to me to be a little bit different. Number one, there's an incredible book called Fair Play. I've heard Eve Rodsky in here before. Like, you can't compete with her concept of how you divvy up responsibilities. It's genius. Like, there's no touching that. But when I actually spoke to her when I was in the process of writing my book, and one of the areas where there was a gap is that a lot of couples really struggle to even have the conversation around the mental load and how you share responsibilities at home, because one of the partners gets so defensive, or they dismiss it, or you get into sort of a competition of like these hardship Olympics. And so I wanted to write a book that really helped couples get to a place where they can have the conversation about how they share responsibilities on a regular basis without it spiraling into an argument. So that's one way it's a little bit different. The other is that if you've heard about social, mental load on social media or even on podcasts, a lot of times it takes one stance, which is that the problem with the mental load is that your partner doesn't do enough. And if they just did more, then things would be better. And that's not untrue in a lot of circumstances. It's not untrue that they do need to step in more. They need to take more initiative. We can talk specifically about what that looks like. But I don't think that's always the most helpful perspective to take, because if we're wanting our partners, it's usually the men, for being transparent, for wanting them to do more, wanting them to step up to the table a bit more, then they have to be, welcomed into the conversation. They have to be part of that conversation, or else it's going to immediately stir up defensiveness. And so when I set out to write the book, I really wanted to write a book that men would want to read, that they would enjoy reading, and that positioned the shared enemy in the relationship as the mental load and not one another. Because the reality is that modern family life is so insanely busy. We feel this just like pressure to always be productive. We have the distraction of our devices. We have this competition and this comparison culture that we exist in. And so there's more on our plates than I think is oftentimes feasible to navigate in today's busy world. And so if we can position the shared enemy as the mental load, we can better approach it as a team and collaborate to navigate it successfully as a couple.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the men being involved and having the willingness, because I always say that you can make a relationship work, but both parties need to have the willingness.
Mm-hmm.
And when I work with couples, you can always tell, like, if one person has one foot out the door, So it's nice because the way that you wrote this book makes it, like I said, so relatable, and it makes it not feel like work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a problem, because sometimes it's guys, sometimes it's girls, it just depends. But a lot of times it's the men who, a lot of men have issues with empathy. They don't even know how to practice empathy or what it is. And so you got to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that your book makes it just easy. It doesn't feel like it's like homework to do, basically.
Yeah, and I checked my DMs before I came in here tonight, and I had a message from a man, and he goes, "I'm a truck driver, and I'm on my second time through your book." And I absolutely love it.
Oh my God,
and so it's been really cool to hear from men, and I get messages pretty regularly from men that they find the book really approachable. They have a lot of aha moments and helps them take more initiative to step into their relationship and the work in their relationship, which is what I think a lot of us women often want, is we want men to like actively participate in improving the relationship.
And it's about showing, not just telling. It's about actually taking the action. As you were saying that, I just looked at the word. Okay. Oh, he left. Okay.
That sex was on the cover?
Yeah. Well, that maybe men are like, oh, okay. So I see you're going to be talking about great sex. So maybe men are drawn to that.
So that was intentional.
Good.
Like
very
in full transparency. Again, I have a secret agenda. I want to write a book that men will read, that they will participate in. And if I have to put sex on the cover, and I know that's stereotypical, and
so
sometimes it fits and sometimes it doesn't.
So great.
I do it, and it's not false advertising. There's an entire chapter, and like it's woven
sex sells.
But I heard from this woman right after my book came out, and she goes, I was not being passive aggressive, but I had to run errands. So I got your book in the mail. I unpacked it. I put it on the kitchen counter, and I went out and ran my errands. She goes, I come home, find my husband at the counter, and he's 3/4 of the way done.
Oh my God. He was waiting.
Thank you. Making a book.
Like, where's that part?
That looks, yeah. So it's whatever brings you to the table.
Whatever, yes. Okay, so let's talk about, so in your book, there is a story, and I call it the socks story. Can you please, high level, just tell the socks story? It's about Chad, the Hubs, because I read it and I was like, this is brilliant what you did with the socks story. So tell us the socks story.
So let me set it up. And my poor husband is like in every story in this book. But he agreed. He signed off on it. So when I wrote the book, the meat of the book is 4 areas that you're supposed to share in your relationship. And so one of them is perspective, one of them is expectations, and then it's ownership and accountability. So this is in the ownership section. And something that's not talked about much on podcasts and social media is how even the default partner, even the partner who carries the majority of the tasks at home or in family life, has some responsibility for how they show up to the relationship. So I have 5 behaviors that backfire. And what the behaviors that backfire do are basically the things that you might do that might shut down participation, like micromanaging or criticizing. Some of this stuff might just shut down participation and ultimately create a problem for you. Because for wanting to lighten the load, we got to have some willingness and some positivity in the relationship. So this one is called personalization. And this always gets an interesting blend of comments when I share this story on social media. But personalization is essentially how we make meaning around the things that our partner does do, doesn't do, does say, doesn't say. And there's an asterisk on this one, and I'll explain that. But the story is my husband travels every single week for work. He has for as long as I can remember. It's just part of our dynamic. And for the longest time, he would come home from work and he would take his socks off. And for some reason, I don't know why, they're always black socks. And he would just toss them on the floor. So I would find them like next to the couch. Some I find them on the coffee table. Once I found them on the counter, which it's disgusting. I don't know why they're on the counter, but I find them all over the house. So I have a decision here because I am in charge of how I create this storyline around the socks. And I could say, every time I grab them and I pick them up, I could say, here he is thinking I am his maid. Like, must be nice having someone follow you around the house, picking up your crap, cleaning it up. I could, I actually posted this once and some lady's like, I would pile all his socks under his pillow. And then eventually he'll start putting them away. And I was like, how nice to be married to you. Who does that? I don't want him to do stuff like that to me. But I could create this entire narrative. He's selfish. He doesn't respect me. He doesn't care that I try to keep the house clean. But I have a decision around this. And for the most part, here's the asterisk. My husband is incredibly respectful. He picks up after himself. He's not like a guy who's disrespectful to me at all. If he were, then we'd have a conversation about the socks, but he's not. So every time I pick up those socks, I have made the decision, And honestly, he saw this reel, so now he doesn't leave his socks out anymore because he didn't read my caption.
Very good.
But it's hats now. So every time I grab a hat or I grab a pair of socks, what I say to myself is, I'm so glad my husband is home. Because normally he's not. And I want my husband to live in our home comfortably, not walking on eggshells. And I don't want that same sort of narrative around me. And I'm annoying in my house sometimes. Like, I don't always screw lids on all the way. And he shook the orange juice before and got in the shower. So, I think that it's important, and not in all circumstances. This is not toxic positivity where I'm saying, okay, just, put a smile on your face and justify all of these things. But it's important to remember that we do have some agency in how we show up in our relationship and how we make meaning of these things. And when we engage in a conversation to shift it, and when we say, you know what, this is a little deal, and I'm really glad my husband is comfortable in our home.
And it's not sweating the small stuff.
Correct. And it's not these things, not sweating the small stuff, but these things, the way that we sort of can walk around in our relationship collecting complaints, start to fuel a really negative attitude about one another. And that becomes really big very quickly. And it can happen on both sides. So this stuff, you can laugh about the socks or whatever, but if I chose to go down that path, before you know it, I'm noticing all of the things that bug me about him. And that will immediately penetrate our relationship and start to sour our dynamic. So it's important.
But I think the best part is that you didn't take it to mean something about you. You did initially. But then you shifted the story, because initially you were thinking maybe he doesn't care about you, he doesn't respect you, but it's not about you. He loves you. It's just, it's like a cigar, Freud, a cigar sometimes is just a cigar, or the opposite, So the socks have nothing to do with his love or respect for you. And so that's where, if you can change the story and also have a conversation. I always say, it's so cliche now, but start with the I statements. I'm feeling a little disrespected, or I'm feeling this way. And then you give the other person an opportunity to say, I'm sorry, which is the best, but also to explain. Like, what did he say, like the first time, let's say, or the second time, when you pointed this out to him? He's not going to be like,
I never
don't
actually did with this one, because it didn't really bother me. But I would say,
but in general, let's say, like in general, there's something that you get triggered by and you bring it to his attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then he explains his side, because everybody has a side.
Correct, which is like the importance of making space to understand each other's perspective, so you can depersonalize it. I will say there's a flip side to this example, which is that, let's say he did leave things out all of the time. It would be important for him to step into understanding that communicates something. So it might not be his intent, but the impact might communicate something that can become problematic in the relationship, which is, I think a lot of couples get in sort of a sticky dynamic around this, where it's like, I'm trying to see the best, but they keep doing the thing, and that's really frustrating, and I don't feel like I'm respected. And so sometimes the socks are just socks, and you don't need to make a big deal. And sometimes if it's a picture of something much bigger going on in the relationship, the conversation can become around, maybe you don't mean anything disrespectful by this, but the impact on me is that it feels like I'm regularly being disrespected. So that differentiation between intent and impact can become really important.
And I think that one of the greatest things that can benefit a relationship is when you do bring something up and you talk about it, and there is a shift, there is a change once two people understand each other. The problem, the resentment, comes in when you have the same conversation over and over and over again and nothing changes. Mm-hmm. So it's nice, and this goes back to the whole willingness. Like, both parties have to be willing to listen to each other, to make changes. And this isn't changing who you are. We are who we are, core. But this is, like we were talking earlier about compromise versus sacrifice. There's a compromise. Maybe he naturally wants to leave his socks on the floor. That's a compromise. He's going to work a little bit harder. Sacrifice is when something is out of your integrity. That is a no. That is when there are big problems in the relationship. But this isn't this is a compromise. And so I think it's important for couples to know the difference between a compromise and a sacrifice.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think, when you talk about willingness to have the conversation, willingness to talk about things, that's where I see actually a lot of couples really getting stuck, is that one partner in particular will usually sort of chase that conversation, initiate that conversation, which takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And then it is sometimes met with an unwillingness to go there for a variety of reasons, some sort of defensiveness or you just make things harder than you need to, or your expectations are too high, or I wish you would just take a little bit of off your plate and not do so much. So that feels dismissive. So I think, part of what I hope couples get out of this book is really an unpacking of some of the belief systems that get in the way of the willingness to engage in these conversations. And then if you do butt up against some of these pushback areas, that you are equipped to navigate it well, so you can kind of break through to the other side. Because at the end of the day, the mental load isn't going anywhere, and it's always changing in terms of the intensity and just how much is on our plates. Like the holidays are coming up, it's just gonna get bananas. Like there's just gonna be so much more that we're navigating. And so you have to be able to engage in these conversations on a regular basis without spiraling down into these arguments in this tricky place.
Yeah, and not feeling so defensive, because as we were discussing before also, when it comes down to it, relationships really are simple. Ideally, it's two people that want to make each other happy. They respect each other. They want to have fun together. But people make things so much more difficult because they bring unresolved issues, they bring the drama. And when it comes down to it, when I work with couples, I ask sometimes, do you have any desire to make each other happy? And sometimes they're like, wait, what? Why would I? And I'm like, and then why are you in this relationship? So that's a big question that when people are contemplating staying or going is really important. Asking them, why are you, like, it's important for people to know the meaning, the point of why they choose to be with this person forever or however long.
Yeah, I think people lose sight of that in their relationships. Yes. There's a few things that come to mind. A lot of times when we're in a place of resentment, we have a hard time giving until we get. So we sort of enter into this protective stance. So we're like, maybe I originally cared about you being happy, but now I'm not happy. So how am I supposed to do anything for you when you're not giving to me? And then it ends up feeling vulnerable to step into that work. And so, in a perfect world, you have this mutual caretaking in a relationship where each person is invested in the other person's well-being as, the other one. So you're both kind of giving and giving equally to one another. It doesn't always happen, unfortunately. In the book, I talk about 2 core needs everybody has in relationships. And I talk about the 3 things men want most in their relationships and women want most. And I think the 2 core needs are we want to feel loved and we want to feel secure. And we feel these things expressed in different ways, men and women do. And a lot of times it gets sort of muddied and confusing. And we have a hard time helping one another feel loved and secure in our relationships in the ways that we want them expressed. And so when this happens over time, I think it's really easy for people's defenses to come up. They start to protect themselves as they're not feeling secure, not feeling loved, or they'll chase. There's all these dynamics that can kind of come out of these things not being met, that can quickly take a relationship where 2 people wanted to make each other happy to a place where they're like, we don't even know, we feel worlds apart at this point. We don't even know really what our common ground is anymore.
And so disconnected.
Yes.
And that's why I like asking that question. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Not that the grass is green or anything like that, but I think it's a good question to really be insightful. And because everybody before people have gotten married have had plenty of relationships. So it's a nice way to look back and reflect on the other relationships and see what they liked, what they didn't like. Is this any better? Is it not? And is it fixable? Because once again, I think anything is fixable, but you gotta both want to do it. Just want to check in on time. Okay. Because we have, I'd say, 2 more topics.
Well,
or
let me just say something to that. How far along are we? Because we could just do questions, maybe.
Let's do another topic and then we'll do some
Okay,
questions.
I'll say. So something that this brought up as you were talking for me is in the book, I have a chapter called "Can We Talk?" And I think that there is this sort of mentality that kind of gets in the way of couples a lot of times being able to talk through issues or get to a better place. And it's that if my partner needs something from me, it means that I'm failing, which I think a lot of men actually kind of jump to that space, to come for a need. It's like, oh, it's never enough. I never get it right. Like these kind of common pushbacks. And also another belief system that sometimes gets in the way is if we have to talk about our relationship, it means something is wrong. And these belief systems a lot of times become barriers to actually regularly talking about your relationship and normalizing that we talk about it. And if you think about dating, your work's in dating, when you say, can we talk? It usually means we're breaking up.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like we're sort of conditioned to go into a committed relationship feeling like, well, if everything is good, we don't need to talk about our relationship. And so if we are talking about it, it means we're not in a good spot, which means there's problems. So we should avoid that at all costs, when in reality, the more we can communicate about our relationship and normalize that, the better equipped we'll be to work through difficult issues. And so, it comes up a lot.
In psychology, there's something called throwing out the trash. It's like carrying this trash bag on your shoulder of you keep thinking of all the things that you want to talk about, but you're not. And then you have this huge discussion, which turns into this huge fight, versus micro discussions as you go out throughout your day, which is so much better, because then you don't have to have we have to talk big conversation.
Yeah.
And I really think that we need a different statement for that. Then we need to talk. Like,
we need it needs a rebrand.
Something. That will be the next book.
Well, I talk about this in the book too, because as relationships become more committed, so in the dating phase, a lot of times men will pursue women. And women will, we like to make them happy. So we do all the extra special things too. And then you become committed and you sort of shift priorities and stop sort of pursuing one another in the same ways. And I think that I'm losing my thought.
Well, what's coming to me, which I will help you with, is that the honeymoon phase dies and people get complacent, and it doesn't have to be like that. Relationships take work.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for jogging my memory. So as you sort of settle into more committed relationship, what happens is that a lot of times the men shift their priorities, and on average, like broad strokes, their priorities shift to providing, protecting financial and physical security, and women shift to really caretaking for the relationships, and which means then they're always and also caretaking the romantic relationship. And so this becomes a problematic dynamic too, because she feels like, how come I'm the only one invested in working on our relationship and putting in the effort? And when are you going to participate in that? Because you used to and you don't anymore. And so these micro conversations become very important. In the book, I sort of culminate with this plan for having regular check-ins in your relationship, which is not a new concept. I give a framework for how to do it around specifically the mental load. But part of the reason this becomes so important is that it shares the management of the relationship between both partners. It's not on her. She feels like you're as invested in caretaking for a relationship as I am. It also, a lot of times, women function with a list of things they want to talk about swirling around in their minds. And it's like never a good time to bring it up. And so we kind of exist with this anxiety of like, I need to talk about this, or I need to process this, or we need to get on the same page about this. So when you have a forum that's scheduled, a specific time you're going to come together and do that, you're not carrying that anxiety. It's like that it's coming, and so you can breathe some sort of relief. And also it normalizes talking about your relationship. So the more that you regularly do that, the less of a big deal it is. And so it can really help the little stuff from growing into big things.
And in a successful relationship, one of the best, in any relationship, it's just the best feelings in the world is to feel seen and heard. And so when someone says we need to talk, and then the person's like, I'm too busy, this happens with my couples all the time, then the other person is feeling like, but I want to use my voice and I want to share how I'm feeling. And if you're feeling like the other person doesn't have time, so that's why it's good to have, it doesn't have to be the same time every week because that might seem like a little too regimented, but just to have the check-ins.
Mm-hmm.
Question and answer? Or did you want to talk about this?
The sex part?
Yeah, well, I don't know where we are in time and everything.
Okay,
Let's talk about sex. So we didn't really ever define the mental load. Does everybody know what it is?
We had one that...
No, you're like, what are they talking about, Stellar?
I have an idea now, but
So,
you can define it.
Yeah, let me give, I'll give you the 30,000 foot and I'll give you a little bit in the weeds because I feel like it makes things clearer. So the 30,000 foot definition of the mental load is the seemingly never ending running to-do list we carry around in our heads that has two key components. So the first is the majority of the tasks in the mental load are invisible, which makes it hard to explain, makes it hard to get appreciation around, makes it hard to hand off sometimes. And then the other is it takes up cognitive real estate. So it just crowds out space in our brains. So it's like, mom brain, or we have like 6,000 tabs open. Crowds out room for patience, crowds out room for creativity, and definitely getting in the mood for sex. So the mental load, everybody has one. It's not just a women's issue. It's just a human issue. But when you look at the research, the majority of the tasks associated with the mental load of home and family life are disproportionately carried by women, which is why it becomes a really big sort of issue within relationships, is because it starts to feel unfair. The in the weeds definition came out of interviews that I did for the book. So I surveyed over 535 women for the book, and then I interviewed men and women. And I sat with this one woman and she's like, I cannot get my husband to understand it. Can you please create a visual? So I made a visual of the mental load, and I think it explains it better than anything. Because there's a piece a lot of times people miss. So the mental load has 3 categories of tasks. You can imagine them like concentric circles. So the first is the physical, and the physical is what guys usually think the mental load is. Like, I did the dishes, I folded laundry. Like, you feel good now? You feel relieved? Are you not overwhelmed? And we're like, not a chance, because there's more to it. The second circle is the mental, and that's just like the making of lists or the steps involved in whatever it is you're doing. The third is the kicker. That's the most important one, and that's the emotional labor of home and family life. And so, it's a mouthful, but I'll say it. The emotional labor is the regular cause and effect calculations that we make to try to maximize positive experiences of the people that we care about. So it follows you everywhere. You can be working full time and be whiplashed back into the emotional labor. It's really hard to hand off because it requires a deep knowing of the people that you love. Also, sometimes women don't trust their partners to do those calculations in the same way and to be as thorough. So it's hard to really release some of that emotional labor. And it feels like the stakes are really, really high. So the last piece is that the majority of tasks of home and family life occur at the intersection of these 3 circles, and I call it the triple threat. And that means that almost every task can be unpacked to contain effort or energy from all 3 domains. So like dinner can just seem like, oh, it's just chopping and cooking. But that's the physical aspect, the shopping, the chopping, the cooking. The mental is the making of the lists, the looking through your fridge, looking through your pantry. What am I going to do about that missing ingredient? I inevitably always have. And then there's the emotional part. How do I make something that everybody will eat, that they'll feel full, that they're getting enough nutrition, and that nobody's crying and whining for a bar at bedtime? So when you think about a list of things on your plate, a lot of women will be like, I don't know why I'm so overwhelmed. Or a lot of men will say, just make me a list. Like, I got you. And we're like, it's too much. And it's because every item on that list will unpack to contain a ton of energy and effort. And so it grows exponentially and becomes very big very quickly.
Do we have any questions?
Okay, the sex part. That was the part I was getting to. I get to the sex, woman. So why sex becomes part of this conversation around the mental load is because when you have a really full brain, when your cognitive real estate is occupied by all these things, especially for women, it's really hard to get to a place where you can find your desire. Sex is part of a relationship. You might have different, maybe you're in a relationship where you're like, we don't need it that much. And if you agree on that, that's great. But it is part of a relationship. So if you remove it, it's going to inevitably affect your closeness, your connection, potentially leaves your relationship vulnerable. So it becomes a critical part of relationships. But women everywhere will sort of say after kids, oh, my libido, everything's changing. A lot of times, one of the factors that we need to consider is, well, how full is your head? How full is your mental load? For women to get turned on, our brains have to be turned off. So this becomes a really important piece. Another is that, to feel connected inside the bedroom, for most women, you have to feel connected outside the bedroom. So if you try to bring up this topic with your significant other and they're defensive or they're dismissive, that is not going to do anything for your sex life, because you're not going to feel safe and loved and connected outside the bedroom. The third way it's really impacted your sex life by the mental load, and this is, talk about Freud. A lot of times what happens is when women try to talk about this with their partners, if it's not received well, sometimes she'll just get a little louder. Sometimes she'll shut down, but sometimes she'll get a little louder. So then she starts sort of chasing. So she becomes the nagging mother and he becomes the extra child. And that is not a sexy dynamic in any stretch of the imagination. So this topic, if it's not something that's going well in your relationship, becomes incredibly important to sort through and to find a better share around.
And just to conclude, somebody said this recently, and I love it, and it's so true, that men are microwaves and women are ovens. Men can be in the middle of a fight and have sex because that is how they are. And women, we need the emotional to be readiness. So it takes us longer to get over something and to get ready. And men are just like, okay, let's take care of this. So that is how men and women are different also as well. Any questions? Oh, we got a burning question.
For talking about the mental load, and in particular for women who maybe have absorbed it for a long time and are very entrenched and the patterns that kind of taking it all on. How do you, whether with clients or whatever, how are you helping them release some of the mental load and trust that their partner can do some of the things that they feel that they alone can do?
Yes.
Right.
It's a good question.
So how do you start walking it back?
Yeah, how do you start walking it back?
There are lots of places you can kind of enter into this. So one way that's important to address is I think there are a lot of women who struggle to even kind of ask for what they need, because they've already set this precedent for so long that they're the ones who just kind of absorb. I talk about women as the bounty quicker picker-uppers. We just kind of absorb things with no conversation. So I remember I had to do all of this work. I was the one who took it all on. And so I began with, FYI, I'm going to be speaking up for what I need a little bit more. And I'm not sure how it's going to come off for a little bit. So you're going to have to work with me on this. But I'm getting to a place of not feeling good in our relationship. And I want to take care of our relationship. So this is for the benefit of us. So you give me feedback. So sort of announcing that a shift is going to happen was really helpful. I think introducing the concept of the mental load in your relationship is really important. So you both start to speak the same language. That's another point of entry that becomes important. And I've found that the most, if you want to set the conversation up for success, it can be really helpful to position it kind of where I started, which is that the mental load is going to be your shared enemy in the relationship. So I would say something like, you may have noticed that I've been more overwhelmed, or whatever you think would resonate with your partner. I've been more overwhelmed. You might notice I'm kind of tense. I get real tense when I'm overwhelmed with the mental load stuff. You probably noticed this about me, and there's actually a name for it, and I want to talk about it together. And it's called something the mental load. I can sort of explain it. Part of the issue with it is that it's just so heavy in life with all that we have on our plates. and it's to a place where it's not feeling good for me, and that's going to affect how we interact as a couple. And I want us to have the best relationship possible. So I want to talk about how you and I can navigate all the responsibilities that we're carrying in a way that feels good to the both of us. And I think we have to make some changes around this. So I just start introducing the topic. I talk in my book about the actual handoff, which is what you're also talking about, like specifically how do you navigate that? And it's very nuanced because I think there are some tasks that are like, you really got to get right. Like I tell a story about when my son went to preschool and they were just like militant about the lunches and like what could be included and what couldn't be. And it was very stressful. So that would be like, we have to have a conversation. So I talk about, you kind of gonna need to sort through, if you're going to hand some things off, is this something that needs to be done in a very specific way? And if so, you can almost do like an on-the-job training. I'm going to show you how it's done. Do you have any questions? Okay, great. This belongs to you. And for the other things that don't really matter, some people will say how you fold the towels matter. Does it matter? I don't know. You got to decide. Okay. Some people really care about that. But for the things that really don't matter that much, that you really want to hand off, I say you got to let them figure it out. You got to let them fail and find their own way. And so that might mean getting out of the room. That might mean coming up with some mantra to manage as they're learning. But if we really think about the handing off of tasks, we've probably had, if you've been doing it a long time, a lot more practice. So if you just quantify the number of times, I think I did it once with lunches. Like I'd packed like 975 lunches for our daughter. So my 976th time is going to be like far superior to my husband's first, if that's something I'm handing off. So some of these sort of reframes around it to give them a little bit of space is really important, because if you hand something off and then it's met with criticism or it's micromanaging, it shuts down the efforts. I'll say one more thing. I listened to this podcast a long, long time ago, and they told a story, which I thought was really cool, where it was about the wife always set up the babysitters. And this one time she just couldn't. And she's like, I need you to handle finding a babysitter. And she goes, so what did he do? He did a group text with like 5 sitters. I was like, here's what we need. First one to reply gets the job.
That's great.
And she was like, he did this so much more efficiently and better than me. And I had no idea. And now this is his. And so I think we have to also leave a little bit of opportunity for our partners to kind of like prove us wrong and to be a bit better maybe than us in some ways. Yeah.
I wonder if you could share a little bit about your writing process.
Sure.
It's your previous book was about your being a mom and your experience as a mother, and now it's about how to improve marriage and relationships. Yeah. I'm just wondering, is it something that you are tracking at all times, or do you sit down and write at the end of the day, or is it something that do you have your third book ready? Or
not yet? I think I crashed after this one. I did 2 in 3 years, and I needed a minute. I think I'm still in my minute, quite honestly. It was a lot of output. I tend to be like a marathon writer. When I first started my first book, I guess our daughter was the age of our son now. So she's 8 or 9. Now she's 12. And so our son was 6, which is kind of wild. And so it's a busy time of life. And like I said, my husband travels every week. Oh, and I also do a homeschool hybrid. So like my work hours are pretty limited. So how we did it was he would come home and he would take the kids away for the weekend, and I would write 3 chapters in like 2 days. So I would just be like mulling it over through the week, kind of organizing it. I did spend some time, like we have a big whiteboard in our playroom, and I just mapped out all my chapters and my concepts and how I wanted it to fit together. And then by the time I sat down to write, I was ready. So I actually write faster than I can read. So that's lucky. But yeah, marathon sessions. Yeah.
I would say if anybody is thinking about writing a book, that whenever these random thoughts come to you, put it in your phone.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, because I think I'm a little bit of the opposite. I'm a disorganized writer. I like to like kind of put it together as a puzzle. Like I just kind of put things on the pages and I just got to get it out. And then I figure out the order. But the point is that as you were just talking, I was remembering moments when I would be writing, when I would just be in the flow. It's called flow. Flow just means you were really in that moment. And there were times where I was writing on my computer and I would start crying. And those are the best moments because you are really there. And that translates so much to the reader. So I would say, and I was bringing this up also, never write when you don't want to write. Write when you're in a place, like it can't feel like a task. It needs to feel like you are inspired and you're ready to just, and then it comes through you.
Yes. I didn't get to do that as much as I wanted to because it was like, I'm taking the kids. You have 2 days. I'd be like, oh, I didn't want to.
Mine was more like an every day from like 10 o'clock at night until 2 a.m. So we all have our own things.
I think every writer, and you probably have gotten to hear from so many incredible authors of like how their process works.
Yeah, we all have time. And like some people are like morning writers. Like I am not a morning worker, writer, anything. Like my creative time is at night. That's when people have different, and yours is like you had your weekends.
I had to do it. You had the muscle through bit. I set timers and I would say I have to write for 45 minutes, even if it's terrible. And by the time I'd get done with 45 minutes, I'd be in a groove. And so I'd find my way.
Does anybody here want to read a book? Any books going on inside of you? Oh, you're writing a book?
No.
Maybe one day. I love to write.
You like writing?
Fiction.
You do?
I have ideas, but I've had the same ideas for years and I've never done anything. So,
Okay.
so the answer is no. It's
Well, yes. Now you can start.
And how much,
Yeah.
Oh, I do have a question. For any of the couples that you interviewed, did you interview any couples where one person was maybe disabled and the other person was a carer? And how does the mental load look when it
That's a good
comes to that
question.
process?
So not for the book. I interviewed men and women separately, but we used to have a podcast. And we, my dad and I say we, like, who's this other person? And for a while, we would just bring real, like, people on, and we would just talk to them about what's going on with them and coach them sort of live. And we had a couple where the husband had pretty significant mental illness. And we talked about what it was like for them to navigate the mental load. And when I launched my book, and I have a section of just like Q&A in my book kind of situation, like troubleshooting. I have a section on ADHD because that comes up a lot too. When I launched my book, I had a guide on that. So not special needs in terms of physical disability, but mental and emotional. And it really adds like quite a complicated layer to the mental load. And usually it requires either more supports. I mean, this is like the unsexy answer. More supports. When ADHD is involved, it usually requires more systems and more structure and built-in sort of mechanisms for accountability. But yeah, it definitely adds a layer. It's not really talked about much or enough. Yeah.
How did you find the couples to interview?
So through social media, just put feelers out and was really just grateful that people were willing to give me their time. They really didn't get much of anything out of it. Besides, we just got to chat for like an hour or two. But yeah, it was amazing. And even when I did the survey, I mean, it was easy to get all these people to fill it out. I think it's a topic that when you're living it, it's just so impactful on your quality of life that people were happy to share and to lend their insights.
All people who wanted to be interviewed by you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you got a selection effect going on for sure. Yeah. But it was really nice to talk to the men too, to hear, what is it that sort of sparks up defensiveness around this topic for you and to kind of dig into some of that. So
I was just going to ask how the researching, like how long you researched and like how that was, it was a follow-up to the writing process question, but like a book like this, obviously, like, or both, like have to have so much research first or simultaneously, or I don't know.
Yeah, right. So you had like once you turn in a manuscript, you have like a little bit of free time before you start getting edits and then before you launch it. And so when I turned in my manuscript for my first book, I knew this was coming. So then I started putting together the survey and putting feelers out to get couples. So I did a lot of my research while I was in the middle of editing my first book. I'd say it probably occurred, just that part of it, like over a 3 or 4 month period. But then there's a lot of just like literature and stuff to read. But I've been doing that over the years because I talk about this on social media. So years of reading about it. Yeah.
I have a question for you. You were mentioning that the couples in the office, you're saying to them, what do you hope to get out of it, or do you want to make each other happy? But isn't it a pretty positive sign that they're in your office in the first place? Mm-hmm. In other words, the couples that you really are trying to reach are the ones that are not.
Well, yes and no. The thing is, a lot of couples, one person reaches out and they're dragging the other person in. Now, sometimes we'll just say men and women, because a lot of times it's the men that don't want to do therapy because they don't like talking as much. So we'll use that example. I literally say to couples like this, I literally say to them, it's not conventional, but I say, this is going to be fun. And then it actually kind of is. Even through the tears and the fighting, the sessions always end, like in my mind, I'm like, it cannot end. We ought to end on a good place. Mm. And it always does. So to answer your question, they, at the beginning, sometimes are not both willing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they never are both willing. So that's why I love my job, because every individual is different, every couple is different. And so it depends. But no, most of the time it's not both people that are willing. But then once they start the process and they see things getting better, then they sometimes they look forward to doing sessions.
Did you interview any older couples, and did you find that when you interviewed them, they had worked out these problems already? Is it mostly younger couples that go through this?
I think it depends. So my pool was from my social media, my email list. So those are going to be people who are kind of like living life with probably babies, toddlers to like teens and tweens, kind of in that phase of still child rearing their children. But I did a 4-hour workshop. I was telling you guys about this. My dad has this way of telling me to do things. And I show up to do this 4-hour workshop on my book. And it's right after my book comes out. And I am like completely burnt out. I'm like, I cannot believe I have to do this. I show up and it's average age 75 in the audience. And I was terrified, honestly. I feel like I can do anything now. Like I talked about this stuff with people who probably have like no ability to relate to what I'm talking about. And I did an exercise, and during the exercise, I kind of walked around and I started talking to the couples. And the majority of the couples said, the women usually, I have been dealing with this for the entirety of my marriage, and finally somebody's talking about it. And so I hope like of most older couples reach a point where they are like, they have worked through this. But I do think that there are a lot of older couples that it's like you've developed a precedent throughout your entire relationship. So the kids leave and you're still kind of in your same roles. Nothing shifts. And so I still think there are quite a few older couples that are just kind of like, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way we're going to continue to go on. But perhaps it was something that was frustrating and bothersome. I tell a story in the book. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, definitely like very just traditional roles, very much a woman who just has a large capacity to do things. But I remember her like huffing and puffing irritatedly, like around the house just like, guess I'll take care of that. Guess I'll do that. You know, she didn't know what the mental load was, but my mom was feeling it. You know, we now will talk about it. So I think it's still a really relevant issue for a lot of older couples. I hope that they find a better place with it. I hope you have. I bet you have.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it always is.
But, sorry, can I chime in?
Oh.
You said you did a podcast with your dad.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit more about that? That's so interesting.
Yes, we don't do it anymore, but it's still out there if you want to listen to it. It's called the Love Thinks podcast. And we like try to bring people in to just share. Like I wanted to talk with a man about the mental load. It's when I first was like, I really need to talk with men about this, not just women. We're in an echo chamber here. And so we had a guy come on, talk about, we had a couple who've been married quite a while who found like a really nice share. They came on, talked about a couple with mental illness. We talked with a couple who there's infidelity in their relationship and they shared their stories. So it was fun. Yeah.
And he's a therapist.
Yeah, sorry. He has his doctorate in psychology.
Wow.
Yeah, he has a book for singles, actually. Yeah, he's been doing this a long time.
I feel like I had many questions, but now I don't.
Remember. They've left the building.
What I was going to ask, but obviously we just sit here and talk about this all night. It's such a hot topic every day. I talk about it with my friends all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not currently in a relationship or married. Most of my friends are, and everything you're saying, I feel like is historically like the stereotypes,
Yeah.
like usual stereotypes. So like with your book, when you were saying you heard from this male truck driver, you know, he had his thoughts on it. Where do you think the dynamic is ever going to change? Where it's like, it's not just the woman bringing the man into the therapy session, or are more men reading this type of book now? Or if maybe they're hearing it better through reading it and not hearing it like maybe from their partner, or you know, it's like it's just really hard. You know, I feel like we have the conversation so often, like you said, with older couples, they just haven't dealt with it, and now the kids are gone, and it's harder to do it when you're older too.
Yes.
And at least it is more talked about now, but it's a generational thing too. I think it's more accepted in a way now, but like with our parents or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it's like there's so many issues. So yeah, like when does it really change?
When does it?
Or how, or all of that.
I tend to be optimistic about it. I think it is shifting. When we look at the research, even like men are spending more time with their kids, and you could pick that apart and be like, well, what are you doing with your kids? And is it actually like relieving any of this sort of emotional labor and mental labor burden? But I do think we're shifting in the right direction. I feel like women, we have a lot of power in how we can shift the societal kind of like current. I believe women are really powerful in that way. And we have really brought this topic, I think, to the forefront. I know I'm like I'm just like in it all the time. So I see it all the time, but I do think it's becoming more of a mainstream discussion, more of a mainstream topic. We have like language and labels for it now. And I think we're leading the charge. And I think that there are a lot of men who for a long time feel confused about how to show up in their relationships, and they're really being challenged to show up with more emotional intelligence. We're raising our kids, we're cycle breaking, we're raising our kids differently, we're being very intentional about all that. I think men are being challenged to step into taking more ownership over how they show up in their relationships, developing their emotional intelligence. And I think there are a lot of men who are passively willing to engage in this work. And as they hear more about these things and see the benefits to the relationship and feel like there is actually a clear path forward to being, involved in the relationship and move the needle and meet her needs in the way that she wants, I think that they will step into the work. I think that they're just like a few steps behind. That's kind of how I'm just like, they're catching up. And I think it's important that we continue to invite them into the conversation. So the men who are like, I'm here, I don't know what to do, but like, I'm open to it, that they're welcome to the conversation and to make these shifts. But I think it's gonna take a bit of time, but there are already signs of positive growth and momentum.
I just want to say that sock story was so meaningful, where you took a possible negative that most people would turn into a negative, like I can't stand this anymore, I covered damn socks. And you took it and said, oh gosh, this means that my husband is home and it makes me so happy. I'm just like, that's wonderful. So that's
Beautiful.
the way it should be. And like, don't sweat the small stuff. That's what I would say is the best advice in a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what you did.
Oh, thank you. I say in the book, gracious interpretations lead to more positive interactions. And it's true. We all want to be seen in the best light possible and be given the benefit of the doubt. It goes a long way. Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
Very meaningful.
So good.
On that note, we should probably wrap up.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in there. Yeah, you too. Thank you for doing this.
Wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Small but mighty.
Anyone who wants to get their
I know.
sign, we do have a bunch up there. And thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.